Ric Flair, wheeling, dealing, high-flying, limousine-riding, incredibly accused of sexual harassing, is back in wrestling as a part of AEW All Elite Wrestling under Tony Khan. This means less time for a women's division that desperately needs it, for young up-and-coming talent that are on the verge of greatness, and overall, I do feel is going to be the beginning of the end for AEW. We're going to jump into what baggage Ric Flair brings to AEW, why people do not want to work with him, and exactly what he left behind in WWE that meant he will never get a job there again. Like the video and we'll jump into it. We start on September 17, 2021. Ric Flair accused of sexual assault by airline attendant on the flight from hell. We need to talk about what's happening here and how credible these accusations may or may not be. We also need to talk about a culture of protection that has historically been a part of wrestling, but we were promised by AEW would not be a part of their wrestling. A lot of promises have been broken in this hiring by AEW to be different, to not be the sports entertainment that Vince McMahon championed, to not be a place where people don't feel safe. Let's start by talking about how Ric Flair has been protected by others. Accusations were made of sexual assault by a flight attendant on the 2002 plane ride from hell. They were exposed on September 16th in the Dark Side of the Ring documentary by Vice TV. And immediately in that episode, Tommy Dreamer dismisses Flair exposing himself and swinging his genitalia around by saying, hey, he's a nature boy for a reason, he's got a hammer on him. This is of course our prelude to the actual accusation. The flight attendant in question says Ric Flair was naked in a cape only. He decided to come to the galley, the kitchen, to get a Coke and then he wouldn't leave the galley. He had me back against the back door and I couldn't move. I couldn't get away from him. I couldn't move. He was spinning around his penis and he wanted me to touch it. He took my hand and put it on him. We then return to Dominic Dreamer saying he was just flaunting, styling and profiling, doing like the Ric Flair stuff where everybody's going to laugh about it, but obviously somebody took offense to it. I personally am not going to blame anyone for taking offense to that. That is literally sexual assault. That is an accusation of sexual assault that Tommy Dreamer has dismissed entirely. And it seems like a lot more people are willing to allow this to just fly under the radar, be swept under the carpet and be forgotten about. Metro's Alistair McGeorge has a little more detail on what Tommy Dreamer actually said. He can move his hips, twirl it, and so his well-endowed penis spins around like a helicopter, because this is one thing we should always protect people for. It's the size of their penis. We all should protect people and ensure that they don't face these accusations, because how can you sexually assault someone if you have a big penis? He added, Ric Flair's not going to try to impose by force any sexual stuff onto anybody. He's just flaunting, styling and profiling. So, are you saying you didn't do it? Because it sure sounds like you're saying he did do it. Now, firstly, we're not actually talking punishment that Ric Flair faced for this, because we have to start with someone who actually was punished. Tommy Dreamer reportedly suspended for Dark Side of the Ring comments on Ric Flair allegations. This is from TV Line. Pro Wrestling Insider reports that Dreamer was asked to leave effective immediately from this week's taping in Tennessee after making statements that were out of line with the company's core values. Impact Wrestling has not yet responded to TV Line's request for comment. I've mentioned a few times now during my spoiler warning live show that Impact in fact are doing all of the things that AEW promised us that they would be doing. Impact Wrestling is in a prime position right now to make a push and try and overtake AEW, though it would sure take a lot of big signings like the names CM Punk, Will Ospreay, Mercedes Money to make things like that happen. We then go to the use of certain phrasing that media use it to protect people. Ric Flair cancelled due to Dark Side of the Ring reaction. To be clear, a commercial that he was in has been cancelled, but they are phrasing this is what culture by the way, as Ric Flair himself a victim of cancel culture, otherwise known as culpability. This is in the wake of the Dark Side of the Ring documentary. It says on the back of the aforementioned backlash against Flair following the show airing, an intermedia spokesperson, it was their commercial, had this to say on the matter. We take these matters very seriously. As of right now, we are pausing the campaign and we will do our due diligence. The campaign did not restart. Ric Flair himself, of course, had a response to make. Ric Flair denies Dark Side of the Ring allegations and says, I never force myself on anyone. In a statement posted on Twitter, Flair denied that he sexually assaulted a female flight attendant on a WWE charter flight from the United Kingdom to the United States in 2002. In a follow-up statement released to WrestlingInc.com, this is via Bleacher Report who were covering it, Flair acknowledged doing the helicopter, but repeated that he did not sexually assault Doyle or anyone else. The name of the person making the accusation was Heidi Doyle, and they have since come to a terms and an agreement and a settlement. He stated, to clarify, the helicopter, as it was called, is accurate. I wish I could blame it on youth, but it was a case of drinking too much and being inappropriate, and I apologise for that and of countless times over the years. So he was inappropriate, but he is denying the claims. I made some bad decisions during dark periods in my life, and it is something I've spent a significant part of years I was given by the doctors in 2017 trying to make right. I condemn sexual assault in any way, shape or form. I could and have written books, as have others, that have covered my transgressions. I've made some terrible decisions, but I've never forced myself on anyone in any way, period. Bleacher Report rightly followed up, stating Doyle and another flight attendant on the plane ride from hell reached a monetary settlement with WWE in the aftermath of the flight. Despite the allegations against him, then WWE announcer and head of talent relations Jim Ross confirmed Flair was not punished by WWE at the time. Jim Ross's name is going to come back up. Jim Ross, as we know, works for AEW now, and let's just say there is no love lost, as I'll cover shortly, between Ric Flair and Jim Ross. None of this, of course, stopped the media circus from going into overdrive via popculture.com. Social media goes after Ric Flair after alleged sexual assault incident resurfaces in Dark Side of the Ring. Once again, I have questions over the phrasing of this. How can you go after someone for something that they've been accused of, which has become public knowledge? How can social media as an entity go on the attack in that way? They carry a quote from Graham Matthews of Wrestle Rant saying Ric Flair is not being cancelled for the sake of being cancelled. He's been called out for something terrible he did, and rightfully so. Some people already knew this story, some did not. It's not about cancel culture, it's about reminding people of how bad it actually was. As a reminder, Graham Matthews is currently talking about an accusation at this point. One fan wrote, thing is, this incident has been documented elsewhere for nearly 20 years, but nobody has called for him to be cancelled or boycotted. Only now, after it goes out on a popular documentary, people are saying it's wrong and he should be cancelled, but said nothing before. This, unfortunately, is a pretty popular line when it comes to social media. The idea is, with evidence or no evidence, if you're aware of someone being accused of something, you should shout it to the rooftops. There is an argument to be made for this. There is also an argument to be made for self-protection. In many ways, if you accuse someone of something, you better have enough evidence to back it up, or they can of course do damage to your career. There is also an argument that maybe you should let it do damage to your career to stop it from happening again. I do feel a lot of wrestling journalists fall foul of the concept of, oh well, I know all these things, but I suppose I should just keep them to myself. That said, you do need the evidence. Another fan wrote, WWE picked a good time to release Ric Flair. I know he requested his release, but they granted it and probably did the right thing. I know this doesn't cause a divide somehow between WWE. Oh, I hope this doesn't cause a divide somehow between WWE and Charlotte, though, now. Stephanie Hypes followed up, Ric Flair got a pass because he was a made man. This is why powerful people get away with. It's okay because they make a company money. In a way, it's our own fault as fans for making people like him feel invincible. I'm sick. This could not be more accurate. Ric Flair is in the position that he is in even now because he's already popular enough that none of these accusations will actually impact him. If someone was accused of this at a much lower level, you know full well that they would be absolutely destroyed. And yet Ric Flair just got a new job in AEW. Ric Flair was a part of the WWE at the time and they took action. Ric Flair's woo edited out of WWE intro amid fallout from exposing allegations from plane ride from hell resurfacing. This, quite simply, is from The Sun, stating that Ric Flair was edited out of the intro to WWE Raw and SmackDown, the then, now, forever that goes beforehand. This was a prelude to a big moment for Ric Flair's career. We then go to What Culture, who I've earlier quoted as stating that it was cancel culture affecting Ric Flair, saying Ric Flair shoots hard on WWE, vows to never work for Nick Khan. This is, of course, during the time that Ric Flair is reported to have requested his release from the WWE, while also blaming Nick Khan for essentially firing him. These quotes do not make sense. Let's get into them. Flair places the blame directly onto the shoulders of Nick Khan, stating, I couldn't ever work for Nick Khan in my entire life. Vince McMahon I could work for, but Nick Khan, who's the guy that orchestrated taking me off the show. I've got my facts together, orchestrated taking the woo off, never in a million years. The big difference between Tony Khan and Tony respects me, as does Vince. Nick Khan has none. I talk to Vince now, I've got no problems with Vince, he just knows I won't come back. As a further indication of the trust that he places in Vince McMahon, despite some shady practices by Vince himself, Flair says, "Let me just tell you something else that should not shock the world. When I saw that they took me off the opening and all that for whatever reason, who knows, I call it a lack of respect. Some people said to me, 'Rick, how do you feel about that?' I said, well, after they asked me to sign my intellectual property to them while I was on life support, nothing that company does surprises me." To be clear, that was in 2017 under Vince McMahon, before Nick Khan was anywhere near it. But he'll work for Vince McMahon again, quite happily. I don't think the WWE will miss Ric Flair at all. One of the main reasons being some of the damage he's attempted to do to some of their biggest stars. Becky Lynch and Ric Flair's legal battle over the man nickname explained via the Sportster on April 10th, 2022. Ric Flair had been calling himself the man ever since his heyday in the 1980s. While it wasn't his main nickname, that being the Nature Boy, which was stolen, Ric Flair felt that he had some ownership of the name as he owns a trademark for his famous catchphrase, "To be the man, you gotta beat the man." In September 2019, Ric Flair's limited liability company registered for the Man trademark. This is, of course, a couple of months after the Man Becky Lynch was born. Once news of this came out, Becky Lynch tweeted she was still the man. However, Ric Flair hit back on Twitter with, "To be the man, you gotta beat the man," hashtag already trademarked. On September 5th, 2019, Flair revealed he'd been trying to work out an amicable, private agreement in which WWE would pay him to allow Lynch to keep using the nickname. This is, of course, around the same time he was trying to actually trademark it. So he saw an opportunity and decided to take it and did significant damage to the brand in the process. Ric Flair wasn't done with Becky Lynch. Via Wrestling Inc., Becky Lynch takes a shot at Ric Flair following latest comments. Flair, of course, loves to just interject himself in moments like this, regardless of his position. Lynch started a promo by saying, "Welcome back, Ronnie," that being Ronda Rousey, which offended Ric Flair. Once again, she's not Ronnie, she's Ronda Rousey. Anybody stupid enough to call her Ronnie and make a joke of her presence and what she brings to the company is out of their mind. You're literally trying to stop someone from using the man branding, but you're offended by Ronnie. Do you ever feel maybe, Rick, you're just not very happy with one particular person? Who, in a segment many years ago, you wrote in that you kissed on the outside of the ring, against her will. Like, this surely isn't a surprise to anyone, accusations like this. He's been doing it live on TV as part of storylines for years. PW Torch ran with Ric Flair apologises to Becky Lynch. Ric Flair apologised to Becky Lynch while both were at the WWE Raw 30 show Monday night. Says, "Yep, I walked up to her and said, 'May I speak with you for a minute?' And I just said, 'I'm sorry it got to where it is.' Flair said, 'The whole thing was decided by somebody besides she and I,' which clearly isn't true, you attempted to trademark it. 'I am not the man anymore. The man is whoever the people think it is, and basically we've turned it over to social media to decide who the man is.' Becky Lynch. That's the decision. That's always been the decision. Go away, Rick." And this drama has already been taken to AEW before Rick even started there. Ric Flair says Jim Ross lost all credibility by working on Dark Side of the Ring. Jim Ross works in AEW, where Ric Flair now also works. He states, "Jim Ross lost every bit of credibility of me in life, in spite of calling me the greatest wrestler of all time or whatever bull, when he jumped on the dark side of wrestling." Despite claiming to have forgiven JR, Flair commented on how he will be attending Raw's 30th anniversary, while Ross likely didn't get an invite. They're now in the same company. It's not going to go well, is it? Ric Flair already making friends with AEW. This, of course, brings us back to now. Ric Flair appearing on AEW. We go back to the Metro and Alistair McGeorge. WWE legend Ric Flair signs huge AEW deal as fans threaten to tune out. Good start, Tony. Fans have already been heavily critical of the move, with one person writing, "It's over for me. This is in no way the company I thought and believed it was going to be when it all started." In his statement, Tony Khan continued, "Rick cemented his legacy as one of the greatest professional wrestlers of all time long ago, and now his world-renowned persona and his amazing wrestling mind will be major assets to AEW's programming and our position globally." I have a question about that. When you say world-renowned persona, are you essentially referring to the character that he built around potentially sexually harassing people? AEW promised us that they were going to be different. This is further proof that, unfortunately, that day has long since passed. What we have right now is a clone of what WWE was 10, 20 years ago. And really, when your champion is someone as talented as MJF, you're getting in your own way. I implore anyone involved with AEW, anyone linked to Tony Khan, to have the conversations. You have the talent there. You're just choosing to ignore it. And that's the most difficult thing. I've already reported in Friday's spoiler warning, the women's locker room in AEW are at an all-time low when it comes to morale. They're not being featured on TV despite all of their efforts, and then you bring in people like Ric Flair over the top of them? What exactly are you trying to do here? While fans are unhappy, while fans are actively tuning out about this, there are definitely subsections of wrestling media that look at the whole affair as Ric Flair being cancelled. As cancel culture gone mad, as the woke brigade being a problem. Ric Flair is the problem. Subscribe if you haven't already. We'll have more for you next week. Thank you very much for watching.